Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I think it's a great testament to see everyone showing up here. I really appreciate the invitation and bringing you out here. We are interested in the region. You know, I'm not here just because you paid for the hotel, but thank you for that. You know, and so I want to do little sort of to start with here. Let's see if this is working. Sort of a quick background on myself. I am American, so I have no problem talking about myself. So to start, you know, I am a partner with 500 Startups. Really quick background on them. If you don't know, they're the most active seed fund in Silicon Valley. You know, we have done 1,200 investments. I've done about 100 of those myself. Basically, I used to run the accelerator in Mountain View. That was our original program. We have an additional program now in San Francisco. Those are about half hour away from each other if you don't know. But that's how much activity is happening in Silicon Valley that we can actually have two programs literally right next to each other. We've done about 15. We're on our 15th batch right now. Each batch has between 30 and 40 companies. And so that's sort of the state of union of where we're at. So we start with the accelerator. Accelerator also, I should mention, is about 50-50 US and international. And that actually does set us apart. Many Silicon Valley VCs do not leave Silicon Valley, even if you got them a free hotel room. They really like to stay local. And the joke I usually use is they will only drive as far as their Tesla will take them. And there's limited range on a Tesla. You know, 500 is different though. And Dave, our founder, had this vision in the beginning to invest internationally. And I gotta say, a lot of LPs just said you're crazy and didn't give him any money strictly because of that fact. We also went into early markets like Brazil and India when everyone's like, you are crazy, that will never work. And now everyone is running into India right now. You know, so we were lucky to get in there early. I am working on the Nordics, so that is my focus. You know, so those are your neighbors over there too. I think you said they're the lazy ones, which is maybe true to an extent. I think it's difficult, you know, to want to drive innovation when you're sitting on a big pile of money and oil like they are in some of those countries. We are interested in the Baltics. I don't have anything to announce officially today, but I can tell you we do have some partners that are coming on. They're going to be focused on this region, and I think I'll spend a little bit more time here. So love to make the first investment, and I think they encouraged you to approach us. Like, definitely time to get over that Baltic shyness. Come talk to me, tell me what you're doing, give me a business card, you know, bribe me in some way. I'm on Twitter, so it's just my last name, @Percival. You're welcome to follow me, heckle me, tell me which jokes are good and which jokes are not. Previously to this, I was actually a founder, so I think this is an important distinction of 500. We have all been building companies, and most of us fairly recently, you know, so in the last 1 to 2 years. I founded several companies, you know, like some of the speakers you've heard earlier today. Many of those failed, and you know, a few of them I sold. Not quite for the $1 billion, but you know, a little bit less. I was VP at MySpace, so I was the vice president of marketing. Everyone's still on MySpace, right? You're all still using that site, right? So once again, learning a lot from failure. I also learned that I will never work for a big company again after that experience. But it was good. You know, it was a challenge. I joined MySpace when they were actually larger than Facebook, you know, and then within 2 or 3 months, Facebook just clobbered us and sort of took us out. So it was an interesting, exciting challenge. We were trying to sort of reinvigorate the site. We tried to rebrand it. We tried to sort of refocus it. Obviously didn't do so well. And prior to all this, I literally got my start as the illustrious position of janitor. I was 18 years old, you know, I'm actually a high school and college dropout. I don't have any fancy degrees. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Someone offered me a job. He's like, I run a janitor company. Do you want this job? And I was like, I'm so desperate, yes. And I took that job. And it was cleaning offices, and this was sort of during the graveyard shift, which is the sort of midnight to 8 a.m. shift. And one of those offices, this is in the late 90s, was a startup. And I didn't really know. I actually was playing with computers my whole life, but I didn't really understand what a startup was. And I walk in there, and everyone's just having a great time, and they're drinking Mountain Dew. This is before Red Bull. And they're playing video games, and the boss is like smoking a big cigar, and he's got his feet on the table, and I was like, wow, this looks like a lot more fun than being a janitor. And so from there, like, I really just tried to teach myself everything I could to get into startup land. And so I was a programmer. I taught myself how to code. I did design. I did marketing, which is where I sort of landed. Of course, by the time I learned a lot of these things, the market had crashed. And so, you know, there wasn't as many opportunities. But what's important to know about Silicon Valley is a boom and bust town. It's been booming and it's been busting, and this has happened in cycles. You know, ever since they found gold, things get crazy like they are today. They bust, flushes out a lot of the bad people and bad ideas, and then it's renewed again. So Silicon Valley, the one thing you have to know is the reason it is sort of the leader of innovation and disruption is because the ecosystem has an uncanny ability to recycle talent, recycle capital, and sort of take failure and actually move it into something. We've talked a lot about that, and as you can see from my career, a lot of what I've done is I like to say I failed up. And I can tell you I've never got more job offers in my life than when my last company failed, and it was a big headline in TechCrunch. that day all of a sudden my inbox was full. So this is something that is nice and unique about the Valley. So I hope it's something you can instill in the folks that you work with here and the culture that you drive. And they asked me to talk about money, which honestly is like my least favorite part of working in Silicon Valley and working with tech. Raising money is not success, although raising money is oxygen. It gives you the ability to breathe and grow. So what I want to do today is I want to talk a little bit about sort of the state of the union of what Silicon Valley is like in terms of fundraising perspective, and also what you can do as sort of hacks to get into the Valley, get access, and get money. This first tweet that you see on the screen, this is Naval. He's the founder of AngelList. If you don't know what that is, it's sort of the social network of startups and investors as well, too. And this is very, very accurate. Silicon Valley right now is at such a fevered pace. There is so much excitement, there's so much activity, there's so much capital, that this is very true. Everyone is complaining there's too much. Too many angels, too many incubators. There's hundreds, if not 1,000 incubators in the States. Too many companies. And then of course entrepreneurs are saying there's too little of everything. Because everybody's fighting for wallet share. Everybody's fighting to sort of get access and get exposure. And this is really accurate of sort of Silicon Valley today. In terms of funding, this is a chart that shows sort of venture capital going into US companies over the last 10 years or so. And you can see our bubble, our first sort of boom in 1999. You'll notice we still haven't actually surpassed that, although we're getting very, very close. And a lot of people, I just had a great interview with some press, a lot of folks always ask me, what is happening? Is it a bubble in Silicon Valley right now? It's important to understand that in '99, this much capital was going into companies that didn't really have a business. They didn't really have revenue. They didn't really have solid unit economics. They didn't really understand what they were doing. Also, think about the market in 1999. There was maybe 300 to 500 million people online, if that. Now we have upwards of 2 billion. We have platforms for growth and distribution, be it AdWords or Facebook. So the climate is different. I don't think it's an apple-to-apple comparison when you talk about the 90s versus today. Although, as you can see, a lot of capital is going into companies. We'll probably surpass this in the next 2 years. So in the Valley, we actually don't like to say it's a bubble. That's a negative thing. We're very optimistic. We like to say it's a boom. And it certainly is booming. So what's good and what's bad? Let's start with some of the good. So there is a lot of capital available. If you have a business that's live, if you have any kind of numbers, you're very likely to get seed funding. The milestones are also incredibly well defined. So as you meet with investors in Silicon Valley, usually they'll be very upfront with you. And let's say you're an e-commerce business, and they'll say, listen, for this type of round, I need to see you at $1 million in annual revenue. The challenge, though, is because it's getting easier to do companies, it's easier to grow, those milestones do move. But it's really clear and concise. It's not very foggy. So you can ask people it's like, this is what we're doing. Are we in the right stage? And I think you'll get a really precise answer. There is a lot of accelerators and a lot of mentorship. And this is where I see sort of a huge gap, both in the Baltics and the Nordics where I work. There is a lack of mentorship, and this is incredibly important for early stage. You as founders out there, you really don't know what you don't know. You need mentors, you need people that have been there, you need people that have both succeeded and failed to help you. There is an abundance of this in Silicon Valley. And then of course there's very efficient ways to raise capital. And one of the primary ways that we do this is through convertible notes. So to do an equity round, it's actually very costly and it's 50 pages of legal paperwork that even I don't understand. A convertible note is 4 pages. It takes my lawyers 30 minutes. They sign it, we're done, we wire the money. So we wouldn't be able to make those 1,200 investments if we had to go through a massive equity round every single time. So convertible notes, I understand, are not extremely popular here, although I keep understanding that it is improving. I would be pushing, as founders, I would be pushing this type of vehicle to your investors. And as investors, I would understand what these are, because it will give you an advantage in the marketplace. There are 2 convertible notes that everybody really uses. The first, one of the big ones, is the Safe Doc. This was created by Y Combinator, and we have our own version called the KISS. It's called Keep It Simple Security or Keep It Simple Stupid. And so both of these documents are available online. They're open source, so you can download it and you can adjust it and tweak it as you sort of see fit. Now, of course, let's talk about the bad. And you notice the bad also is a lot of capital is available. So what does this mean? Why is this bad? Money creates a lot of interesting opportunities and a lot of challenges. So the bad in this is that now you have so many companies raising seed funding that it's going to be harder to raise a Series A. You have challenges around residential, just housing, talent, cost of living. I don't want to talk about how expensive it is out there, but basically what I'm paying per month on a rent, it was more than my first car or my first 2 or 3 cars. So the cost of living has risen dramatically, so much so that we've had to up our investment that we put into companies. So all this capital is creating a very, very sort of, once again, the boom, not the bubble. So it's bad as well. The bar to raise Series A is incredibly high. Before you could do that if you had a little bit of traction, you had stuff going, maybe you're doing $1 million in revenue per year. Series A is incredibly difficult. So we are likely to see some type of what we call the Series A crunch. This is when all these seed companies go to raise Series A, they can't get that big round done, and they unfortunately run out of money. They run out of oxygen. There is saturation in certain verticals in the valley. Anything about on demand, when I'm in the city, there's 50 to 100 ways I can get food, I can get a car, I can get marijuana. There's anything that you want in these apps. And there's actually too many of them. So I feel what will happen is there'll be sort of a rapture. Some companies go up to IPO heaven or get sold. Other companies unfortunately do not. So I would be thinking about, as you build businesses here, is it something that I can build that differentiates me? Is it something that's not saturated in the valley? Because I think you have a big challenge going out when there's already 20 to 30 companies doing the exact same thing that you're doing. And then, of course, what's maybe most relevant to you is it is still difficult for companies to raise money, international companies, that is. And why is that? I think in the first 90s, a lot of the first boom, a lot of investors did go international. They went into places like China. They lost a lot of money. There's a bit of heartburn associated with that. Also, you should understand that as VCs, we really only have 2 jobs. We need to deploy capital and generate a return. So money goes out and we got to get money back. If you're an international company, there's a lot more complexity, there's tax issues, there's risk against our money coming back or getting as much as we can. So this is why there's some concerns. At the same time, there's so much happening in the valley, I feel like most investors don't feel like they need to go out. But once again, this is where 500 is different. The world is a very, very big place. I think it's foolish to be stuck in your own backyard. Our view is there's 1 million great founders out there in the world. How do we find, fund, and support and help them? So let's start to talk about how you actually sort of hack and get money in the valley. So this is probably a bit self-serving because I happen to work for an accelerator, but honestly, accelerators are the best way to get access. And it really comes down to one thing. If you go to 500, if you go to YC, if you go to Techstars, you're almost looked at more of oh yeah, that's a YC company. You're not really looked at as oh, that's a Latvian company? Where is that? Is it cold? I don't understand. So you're looked at more as sort of you're part of that collective. You get the strength of that. You get the branding. You get the seal of approval. And once again, these accelerators have taken that first step. They've put the first money in. They've significantly de-risked the investment for other investors. So this is by far the best way to do it. And the great thing is, Techstars has locations all over the world. YC doesn't really matter, doesn't really care where you are. Our batches are 50% international. So we are not scared to bring in great international companies. So this is definitely your best way to get in there. What's also important is finding brand name investors or advisors. A lot in the valley is what we call signaling. So when we look at your site, when we look at your deck, we really want to see do I know anyone that's associated with this company? So if you can't get investors, which is difficult to get, maybe if you're international or you're early stage, be thinking about advisors and be thinking about how you approach these people and get them to put their name next to your company. So a great example is I'm building a YouTube ad product. If I could go and get an executive or a former executive of YouTube to put their name as an advisor on that company, when I look at that, it goes a long way. It says, great, and I probably don't know that person. Him or her, I don't know what their position is, I may not know them. But if I look at that and say, wow, they have a former YouTube executive who's put their name on this, it goes really, really far. So that's a bit of a way to sort of get this association, get the signal without having them actually put money in. Of course, with 500, we really push marketing and distribution, mostly because you have to in the valley. You're either growing or you're dead, unfortunately, to be blunt. So it is incredibly important that you are building momentum with your business. You're growing the business, even if it's small and it's a sort of a low baseline. If a business is growing 10 to 30% month over month, and it's been doing that for 3 to 6 months, that's kind of what we need to see. And that will take you along, that will take you very, very far. So I think this is a challenge I see both in the Nordics and potentially in the Baltics too. Too damn shy, too damn sort of modest. You do have to get out there, beat the drum, make some noise, learn how to acquire customers and grow the business. Talked a little bit about AngelList. That was the sort of the first slide in here. So start using this today. Start looking at what other companies do to sort of position themselves. When we look at your company, we Google you, this is likely to come up number 1 or number 2, actually maybe number 3 beyond your official site. So once again, this is our social network. You can easily display your team. It's how we get a quick snapshot of what you're doing and who you are. Not extremely popular in Europe or here, but once again, I feel that's changing. They're doing a lot more activity in the region. So also in terms of having the right structure, Silicon Valley VCs, we really only invest in one type of entity for the most part. This is a Delaware C Corp. This is what our lawyers understand. This is the most efficient and safe from a tax perspective. So what international companies need to do if you want to be very serious about raising money there, likely going to have to become a Delaware C Corp. Basically, the Delaware C Corp owns the Latvian company. The IP moves over to the Delaware company. That's what they want to see. So you don't have to do that today. But if you're like, okay, the next year we're going to the Valley, we're setting up an office, we're raising money, you are going to need that in place. And then, of course, having a presence in the Valley or faking it. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. Tourists do not raise money in the Valley. Please don't ever think that you can come to the Valley for a week and you're going to walk away with a big check. That just does not happen. Once again, at the top here, this is why accelerators really help. You'll spend 3 months. You'll build your network. But you do have to have a presence there, and we do have to feel like, wow, they're here, they're vested, they have half their team here, half the team there. They're not just going to sort of take my money and disappear, into sort of cold Latvia. So how do you fake it? Accelerators give you an address. That's a big sort of plus. There's many co-working facilities you can have. If you're serious about it, though, you basically say, oh, where are you located? And the best answer is, you know what? We have operations both here in the Valley. We do our engineering back home in Latvia, where engineers cannot be stolen by Google. And so that tells them, it's like, wow, they're being really smart, they're going to retain talent, they're going to do sales and biz dev out here, and they're going to have a great, solid engineering team back home. How am I doing on time? I feel like I'm going way over. I'm good? Yeah? Oh, okay, 10 seconds. Woo, geez. All right. We'll go through this. All right. American style, really quick. Okay, so to sort of wrap this up, also just be thinking about the type of investors you want. They are value add. They do business development connections for you. They help you get talent. They help you fix your cap table when the bad investor screwed it up. They add value to your company. They will be there for you when things go wrong, and they most certainly will. I don't know if I've ever worked for a startup where nothing went wrong. My last startup I did, my best investor, he came down on a weekend. Our financial model was completely screwed. We were trying to fundraising. We're having all this trouble. Comes down on a Sunday, helps us fix it, spends his time away from his family with us too. So you want to think about that. People you can reach out to and be like, yeah, I'm screwed. I'm in a lot of trouble. And they're going to be there for you. This also goes to that point about advisors. They send the right signal. I look at your existing investors, I look at your existing advisor, I know them, I understand them, I trust them, they boost the signal of your company. Also, most important too, is their reputation is more important to them than the capital they provide. Silicon Valley, the nice thing about it is there's not many bad actors. If you're a bad actor, you get pushed out of town. It's very hard to keep doing business. So you want to focus on folks that are very worried about their reputation, they want to help you and provide value and be supportive. And then the final and the most important point, and this is part of our sort of mission actually, is they know how to make money, they know how to drive revenue, so you're not so dependent on them. The best business is a profitable business that's self-sufficient. And then most importantly also, it's not all about work. They know how to have fun. We look at this way, we're probably going to lose our money in your business. We might as well have fun along the way. So they help you build the business, they help you get sustainable, and they help you have a good time. And that's it. Thank you.